Hello, welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, my guest is the musician, Ceschi, and his guest is the writer, Ocean Vuong.
Hello.
Hello, mate.
How you doing, mate?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Audio working?
Yeah. You sound good.
Okay,
You
great.
sound clear. You sound relaxed.
Yeah, a little bit intimidating, but
Yeah, you picked a heavyweight now.
totally.
You were in Tasmania last time I was writing to you, I think.
I was. That's right. Yeah, this is it's been a whirlwind year for sure. So it's been glad we could find this time to do this. It's cool.
Yeah, well, if you want something done, give it to a busy man, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how was the tour then?
I mean, it's kind of a funny setup because we are actually touring all the way till October of 2024, but they're just big shows, with no effects. This is my new band I'm in, Whiteness, and they're doing their final show October 2024. So we're on all of those shows, and so those are only like one or two shows per month, and so then we add other club dates or other dates or between those. So this has been my slow month because my next show is not till the 23rd of July. So
And what was the name of that?
I'm sort of
What was the name of the band again? Because there's so much to. I've been researching you so much, but I've missed so much. It's a lot. It's a
co-defendants.
lot. Co-defenders are.
Yeah.
There's a lot to take in. You have to give me.
Yeah, 20 years of work.
Yeah, because you're. We're all about like people in service to others. You could have been a guest on the show because you're a label owner and you've been really making, raising all the boats, pulling everyone up, which is really
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's true.
Yeah.
Done that for 15 years now, the label.
Yeah. You had so many great artists in that. I mean, I'm not so au fait with the hip hop world. We do more of like folk and indie, but yeah,
Yeah, I was
some
curious
great.
how you heard of me. How did you?
I was in touch with Sage Francis, and
Oh, okay.
I've
Makes
been
sense.
chasing him for a long time, and but he can't seem to think of a guest to interview who's still alive. Um, it's proving to be a bit of a
That's
problem. Yeah.
that's that's cool that he recommended me though.
Yeah,
So
but I need to think if you could recommend him some guests because you had a good short list there. So maybe you could give him one of yours.
yeah, that's a tough thing to ask somebody because you don't really uh you start thinking that certain names are impossible, but then you were like, no, go for the impossible. And then I really didn't expect this to happen.
Yeah.
Because Ocean's like kind of killing it. It's super on a huge level right now. So that's yeah.
Mm.
But this is one that came up specifically because I did this whole podcast about On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, the Ocean Vuong book. And I don't even know where that podcast is, but it brought up a lot. Reading that book multiple times brought up a lot of personal questions I had, just kind of like stuff that wouldn't have been asked on other interviews. So I was like,
Hmm. So
curious.
you interviewed someone, or you were asked about
It
that?
was like a book podcast that I did with this woman, and she asked me to pick a book. That was the book I picked. So that's probably one of my favorite books of the last decade, easily. So I reread it and I did a whole podcast about it.
Mm.
So it made me really, it kind of left me with a lot of questions. Hopefully I don't have questions written out. I just have like speaking points. I just hope that
That's the best way. Who wants to come on for a job interview? I mean, it's
Right.
It's just a
Right.
conversation. If he's coming around your house for dinner, you wouldn't make sure you had enough questions for him on the table. But it's
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised because your image, you're a punk, hip hop, hard, loud artist, and then he's a really delicate flower. You wouldn't expect you to be so inspired by him just on the, you know.
Yeah, that shit is I think Ocean's writing is super, super hard though. It's like
Yeah.
so those are some of the questions I had as well. I mean, there's a lot of violence and war and it's punk to me. And actually I have specific questions about punk music, the Ocean, and seeing where that fits in to the
Mm.
inspiration. So should
Yeah.
be cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because you've already worked with many of your heroes in the music business. You've kind of ticked all those boxes now. So it's great for this. This is what I don't want musicians interviewing musicians on this podcast. I want it to be because it's a bit incestuous. It's nice to, we're going to work on a song together. It's going to be about something different, bigger than if we talk to a musician or,
Yeah, that's where our brain goes. Initially when you bring it up, it's like, which musician friend of mine am I going to interview? It's like,
yeah,
no, I'm just going to, this is a much better idea.
yeah, yeah. And most of the musicians I get, they offer, they just come up with names of the other musicians. So I really have to go back to them a second time. I've had, I almost can have a template email, I could just reply to people with
It's
a,
cool seeing I was looking back at some of your podcasts and, I've known Al Lover a really long time.
oh, really? Yeah.
And I'm a fan of Carl Blau and the whole K Records scene,
Ah,
um, big time. I'm actually good friends with Little Wings, so
hmm.
Kyle Field. So
Oh, wow. Well, I guess when someone is hardworking as yourself, you meet, your network just grows because you visit so many places and you know,
yeah, I mean the Kyle Field connection is really interesting because we toured Hawaii together, and this is like 2006. So we maintained a friendship. We had a really unique tour, so that
yeah,
was cool. But yeah, that's how I know about Carl Blaus from
mm.
that whole
Yeah, you could be
scene.
hosting a podcast like this. You wouldn't need to email people like I do, and cold calling you.
I'm
You
too
just
lazy, you know.
lazy is not a
Listen
word
for
that
that. I
people would use to
one of
describe you.
my good friend, one of my friends in music, Open Mike Eagle is a rapper. He he does. I'm always amazed by people who do kind of this consistent kind of work. Like Open Mike Eagle's doing a morning stream every other morning or something. I'm like, damn man, like that kind of consistency is amazing because I travel so much. I can't even imagine
Mm.
committing to something like that.
Yeah,
But I think it's cool.
you're spinning all these plates now, and you spin one really fast, and then you move on to the next one. You spin that really fast, and then it looks like you've to someone that you have a very busy days. But I imagine you do that really concentrated, and then you move on to the next thing, and then you tour, and then you come back, and then 6 months later you release something you did. You know,
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I think people think I'm constantly on tour, but I haven't played a show in almost a month.
you must be getting
To
cold.
me, that's like, uh, yeah, I need it every once in a while. It makes me feel normal to play shows.
I'm getting a bit of a delay on your internet. Is it? Could you check that again for me? It seems to be.
Yeah, I don't know exactly.
Can you
Make it.
move plug in or?
Let me see where I'm at my girlfriend's house and it's kind of, you know what? Maybe if I just, this should be a faster connection.
Okay.
Give me one second. Yeah, that should be better. Seems to be.
Okay.
I was in the baby's room. So
Where are
um,
you? Where do you live in America? Where are you now?
I'm in San Antonio right now. We're moving back to Connecticut though. Which is another reason I wanted to interview Ocean because Ocean's from Connecticut. So
Oh yeah. Okay.
yeah. So there's this very not a lot of artists from Connecticut that are I don't know that are visible. A lot of people say they're from Brooklyn or something when they're actually
Yeah.
from
Yeah. Yeah.
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Yeah.
So
I don't know. Yeah. I'm in Italy here, so my knowledge. I mean, we all
yeah, what
absorb
part
it.
of Italy are you in? I remember I hearing that.
Yeah, I'm about an hour and a half south of Napoli. So,
Oh, nice. My
I'm.
grandfather is from there.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it an
he's
Italian
from
name or your heritage then?
my I'm Puerto Rican Italian.
Right,
So
Puerto Rican.
my father's from the island from Puerto Rico, and my mother's first generation
Oh, okay.
Italian.
Yeah, it's difficult to. I get confused easily with that.
Yeah. So yeah, my grandfather's family is from like San Marzano.
Okay.
Like yeah,
Oh,
so
wow. Because I heard you singing in Spanish on your latest song. So,
yeah, that song is actually a cover of Silvio Rodriguez, like a late 60s, early 70s um song from that era
really,
from Cuba. So basically shortly after the revolution, that song was probably yeah,
no, it's very beautiful. Yeah, yeah. You're certainly mixing the genres there.
yeah. And so how's it gonna work with the song portion of this?
Well, yeah, we'd love to collaborate. So we have a. I've got some great musicians here in Italy. We're working on songs every week with different artists from all over the world, and we do different genres. And we haven't actually done hip hop yet, so maybe you could baby step us through it. Or we can do. We've got
Okay.
drums, guitar, and bass, and we can. Uh, we can. But you mean you're not stuck in? It doesn't have to be hip hop. It could be maybe it's
No,
a
I've
flamenco.
actually been doing a lot less hip hop recently, but I mean everything I do is kind of hip hop. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Everything has a that's the first type of music I tried to make when I was little. But I mean, playing guitar almost as long. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah, I'm never really stuck in it. But
I mean, how do you usually work with a collab? Because you've collaborated with so many people. What do you
oh,
usually?
it depends on the song. I mean, a lot of times in hip hop, the music is kind of pre-made. It's been made by a producer,
Mhm.
beat. So a lot of times my collaborative you know, addition would be just to write a verse,
Okay.
and rap. So that's usually the majority of collaborations I've done are like that. But I've also done stuff where, it's um, I've written the music with somebody else or
Mhm.
played an instrument. Um, so
Yeah, I heard you say in one interview you really like, well-made pop song, a well-crafted.
yeah, I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, we can go for that, and we can. I guess it just, you know, we do the song after the interview for a reason. So we're going to see, how we feel, how we're inspired, and then.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think the easiest way would be maybe toss me a musical idea. But if you
Okay.
have something cooking, and then I
Yeah.
could start writing to it.
Yeah. Okay. We can do that. Yeah. See what comes out after the interview. It's a guaranteed inspiration, I think. So.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes. Hopefully, I don't flub it too much.
No. No. He's such a. He's such a. Just his voice is to listen to is so calming, and
Yeah,
yeah, I'm really, I'm really looking forward to getting him on and hearing what he has to say,
yeah,
and it's such a good interview because it's you're an artist as well. You're used to being interviewed. you know how tiring it is to be asked the same old questions. So,
Right.
that's not going to be this interview. This is just going to be like a chat between two artists about, and what may end up talking about gardening for a half an hour, who knows what. It's just a conversation, flowing thing. So yeah, it's going to be beautiful.
I hope so. Um, yeah, I'm sort of like placed on the couch now, trying to make sure I can do this right now. But,
Yeah,
um,
it's no video. You can
yeah, as long as
probably.
the connection's good, because it's
Yeah, no, it's
connection's
much
much
better now.
better.
But thanks for moving. Yeah, yeah, that really made a big difference. Yeah. So how did you first hear about his work? Or is it very
Oh,
famous?
so one of my friends who's actually a professor at Oxford now. I'm sorry, at Cambridge. Cambridge.
Same thing.
Yeah, right. I just visited him actually last couple months ago. It's my first time up there. He lent me this book, and we went to college together in Hartford, Connecticut, where Ocean grew up. So I think that's the reason Christian lent me the book,
Hmm.
because I think he saw a lot of he'd feel like I'd relate to it on some level. So,
Oh.
but I think that was it. That was really it. It was like the Hartford connection that got. So I should give a shout out to my friend Christian Sriracha, who is teaching in Cambridge right now. He's a fellow up there,
Wow,
and
smart guy.
yeah,
Mm.
he's a professor of poli sci, but
What's
focused
that?
specific political science, but
Oh, gotcha.
foc- focused specifically on China. So that's what he writes about.
Wow.
So,
Because I guess Ocean also had a different, because he's a Vietnamese heritage.
mhm.
So, he has your Puerto Rican heritage as well. So, and
Yeah, yeah. I think reading On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I mean, Puerto Rico. I don't know if you know anything about Hartford. I doubt you do. But it is a famously Puerto Rican city.
oh, yeah.
So yeah, we have it's a large Puerto Rican population. So I know that Ocean has experienced some of my culture
Yeah.
as
Oh,
well.
wow. It's a very, yeah, because if he wasn't Vietnamese, he could say he has some air of Puerto Rican about him as well. Some sort of, he's cosmopolitan. He's very,
Right, and there's yeah, there's a I guess I could use a better term, but there's an urban feel to the writing as well.
mm,
That's meaning someone that knows the city, and this is it's an interesting city because it's kind of a parts of that city are kind of abandoned.
mm,
It's kind of like it was this major hub of the insurance industry in the United States for a long time, and it still is. There are insurance companies there, but at one point in history, it was the second poorest city in all of America, all the
wow.
U.S. So I had I had I really had a lot of history there. A lot of the Puerto Ricans who ended up being in Hartford ended up there because of the tobacco fields outside of Hartford. Ocean's first job was in the tobacco field outside of Hartford.
Was it one of the poorest areas when you were growing up, or is it at it?
When I was in college, I got a scholarship to Trinity College in Hartford, and it was this at that time one of the poorest cities in the US, one of the biggest unemployment rates. And I worked a lot in the city with kids. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club, and I I was part of the American Studies program and the Hartford Studies program. So I really got to know that city and its history pretty well. Actually, it's a really important city for the history for, of the Puerto Rican independence movement,
Hmm.
which in my family has been connected with um, since way before. Many people in my family are connected to that movement as well.
Mm.
So I'm curious about what Ocean knows about that history.
Does he still live there, or he's moved on
No,
to?
Ocean lives in Massachusetts and teaches at UMass, I believe. I believe UMass Amherst. I might be wrong about that.
And when you move back, are you going to go to Harvard or are you going to go to another
No,
town?
I'm going to New Haven. I haven't. I just went to school in Hartford, so I lived there. Did 4 years there.
And New Haven's a bit more.
New Haven's a bit more of I'm not trying to talk down on Hartford, but New Haven's to me is like the more artsy kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's even hard to say that about New
It's not
Haven.
on the water.
Yeah, to me it's the nicest city in Connecticut. Like there's the most happenings, the biggest I don't know, there's a lot of venues, there's a lot of um art galleries and
Mm.
great restaurants and stuff. And I Hartford has that too to some degree, but it's just, yeah, New Haven to me
Mm.
is like where things happen
And
in that
you're
state.
very close to New York now. You can.
Yeah, I'm directly in between New York and Boston.
Oh,
Closer
okay.
to New York, but like Hartford's closer to Boston. New Haven's closer to New York.
Okay. Oh, that's a nice area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. It's relatively inexpensive for that area.
Mhm.
You're probably paying about a third of what you'd pay for rent in New York or Boston.
Yeah.
So, so,
No, I've
and my
traveled through
mother,
there.
my
Yeah.
mother's from there,
Okay.
so I have history there.
Yeah. Yeah. I've traveled through. Never went to that area. I did go to Boston. I must have passed it in the car, but I never stopped. But
Yeah, you have to pass through it.
yeah.
Yeah, it actually has a big Italian population, and that's why we have some of the best pizza, most would say in the world, because it's because of the Napolitan influence.
It's not as good as here.
Eh?
Yeah. There's no.
It's a
I
it's a
have
it's
not
it's a
pizza.
stuff.
It's not.
No, no, no. It's nothing like New York pizza. It's a very specific. Look up New Haven style pizza. For real.
Okay.
Look it up.
All right. This is something everyone makes a claim for, but I am near
No,
Napoli.
this is and it was all people from Napoli who went
Yeah.
to move to the area.
But it's also the water, from Vesuvius and the tomatoes growing in the volcanic ash. This
Right.
it's
And
these
I've had
really
pizza in Napoli, believe me. I know I've had where they've made the first margaritas. I've had it. I
okay,
love it. It's very
okay,
different. New Haven has its own style, but it's an amazing
all right.
style pizza. And
Well, I don't want,
most
I don't.
most top chefs and stuff agree with me. So
Okay. Well, I don't want to fall out this early in the podcast about something.
no, I love pizza in Napoli.
Yeah,
Don't get it twisted. I
yeah.
love it. And this is not really the same style. This is like really well done, super thin,
Is it
um,
crispy or?
cold. Yeah, it's not sometimes it's coal ovens. So brick ovens,
Oh,
coal based brick ovens. So it's a lot of people who are tourists, they come and they're like, this burnt pizza, what's wrong with this? It's like, no, that's the way we like it there.
but you get the taste
Super
from the wood. They
thin.
use a special wood here, and you get a good taste from the wood. It's
Yeah. We use
the
not
coal.
wood
Okay.
in New Haven style.
All right.
They have Napoli style pizzerias in New Haven, but it's a very specific type. Super thin, thinner than anything I've had in Italy,
Mm,
and
okay.
more well done.
Okay. All right. I'll have to try it next time I come over.
Yeah.
And so, why are you moving back there? Not because of the pizzas.
I think just family. Trying to be there with um
You go through
yeah.
that age in life. We're getting older, and you feel like you have to get away, and then you realize that you had it good, and you come back, and
Yeah, I mean I've been in this band and we moved to Las Vegas for the band, and um I've actually kind of like I've just kind of sacrificed a lot moving there. So has my other bandmate. I mean, we both kind of gave up our living situations. He did more than I did actually. I kept my apartment in New Haven the whole time. So I just think it'll be a wiser decision
mm.
for many reasons.
And you
I
still
can
play with your
fly.
brother. Your brother, you still playing
I
that?
play with my brother. I do play with my brother. We just played in May. our first for the first time live and since before pandemic though. So yeah, that'll be a nice thing too, to be able to play with him more
Yeah.
often.
So things are getting back to normal after the pandemic because
Yeah.
yeah.
Normal, I guess. There's no yeah,
You notice a
exactly.
difference before and after? Like hasn't got back to
Oh yeah, I think it's shifted what normal is for the entire world. You
seriously
know what I
still
mean?
there?
Yeah. I think I think a lot of us sort of have become accustomed to certain new norms that were set in place by the
Zoom.
pandemic. Yeah, exactly.
Good for podcasting, but
Yeah.
not good for live. I mean,
But I have noticed that at least being a touring musician, that seems to be back in effect and like,
yeah, that's
in a
what I
good
meant.
way.
And
Cause even a couple years there, like I tried touring in 2021. Um, it was shaky. It was good. It was all right, but it was definitely an uncomfortable. I think this is the first year I felt like people are back and kind of feeling
mm,
comfortable at shows and kind of like that's been a nice shift back to wanting to see.
because I heard you could go down to Florida and play like normal, even during the pandemic. And
We did. We played in 2021 in Florida, and that was about the most normal show. Um, but it was still there. It wasn't because especially the spaces we were playing, a lot of people didn't feel safe coming out. We needed
mm,
work, so it
mm,
was it was kind of urgent for us to have other work. I mean, um, we tried it. I remember one of the tougher tours was January 2022. I went on tour with this punk band called Get Dead, and it started great. We had a few great shows, and then the COVID was peaking again, and then suddenly all the shows started dying out. By the time we made it to LA, it was like the smallest show I've ever played in LA, and there were supporters driving up to the venue trying to buy merch from their cars, like a drive-through from me. Be like, I'm not gonna go into that club, but bring me a shirt and bring me a record. It's fucking strange.
jeez. Did you
But
have
yeah,
like a
that's
pandemic project? Did you come out stronger, or did you ever?
yeah. What I ended up putting out in 2022 was is a record called "This Guitar Was Stolen," along with "Years of Our Lives," and that was my pandemic project, I guess. Mostly because I couldn't go up to Canada and work with my hip hop producer. I did a whole guitar record, and
Yeah.
it became kind of a thing I would do weekly. I'd
Hmm.
go into my friend's studio. It was kind of like a field trip for me to go every week or every other week and record. I recorded the same songs over and over again, just live, like one take,
Hmm.
two takes, and then I would go back the next week and see which take was better. And in the end, I compiled them, put it out November of last year.
Mm, yeah, you'll find a way through. You're a worker.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah, that was cool. It worked
Mm.
out well.
You could say this guitar was borrowed. I heard about your technique from Guitar
Yeah,
Store.
right. Yeah, I'm thinking about that right now. I have to figure out because I'm doing some shows soon in the Northwest.
Mm,
I'm borrowing guitars from friends, but for San Francisco, I think I got to pull one of those Guitar Center.
mm. I use
Sorry.
Amazon Prime. You get 30. You get send it back in 30 days too.
It's true.
Yeah, yeah,
Very few questions asked. I was
yeah,
trying
yeah.
to, I was trying to tell my partner that
We
very
had
few questions asked.
we had a we've done quite an anti-Amazon episode as well, and I'm very against it, but I use it still. It's still, I'm in
Well,
the
try
middle
to
of it.
try to get what you can from them, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, you do. I mean, if you go to a local shop and you say, will you give this? I'm going to drive over to you. Will you give me a discount? And if I don't like it in 30 days, can I bring it back? And yeah, they don't like that.
Yeah. 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 Just gonna do this audio style.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take my face off so I don't have to look awkward.
Hello.
Hello, Ocean.
Hi, this is Ocean. Hello, everyone. Hi, Ceschi, and hi, Jack.
Hello.
It's
Pleasure to
really
be.
nice to meet you.
Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Yeah. I love the work. I love what it's doing and what its great ambitions, and anything we talk about will be a great treat. So, anywhere you want to take us, I'm all yours.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Jack, are you involved in the conversation with this, or is
No,
this kind of
no, no,
between us?
no,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
I,
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Ocean. This
Yeah.
is
Did you grow up in Connecticut?
yeah, so that's a big part of the reason why I picked you as uh as someone I wanted to speak to, is because I I lived most of my life in New Haven,
Hmm.
but I went to school. I went to Trinity College in
Oh,
Hartford.
okay.
And the reason I was lent your book On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous was because a friend of mine, Christian Sriracha, who's a professor of Chinese politics, political science professor,
Oh,
he lent it to me, and he was like, "Yeah, you got to read this. This is Hartford is properly represented in this book." And so it was something I rarely see, and it was and I have to say it's probably my favorite book of the last decade, and it
wow.
was deeply inspiring, and I ended up gifting it to so many friends of mine as well, and it was just and so that's why I wanted to talk to you. That's
Wow.
kind
Well,
of
I'm deeply honored. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think you're right. I think Harvard has a great literary history, but so much of that production with Wallace Stevens in the 1950s and Mark Twain in the 19th century and Harriet Beecher
Mhm.
Stowe, so much of that's from a different world, right? Harvard doesn't look
Right,
like that anymore. And I just felt that for my debut, I had to kind of update the world on who we were, the immigrant communities that made us who we are, and to embrace the grit and the grace at once without judgment. And I think it's something that no journalist or writer has ever offered. That generosity was not given to our city, in our state, even. I didn't realize.
right.
Connecticut had a reputation, or a rather sort of stereotype, until I went to New York to go to
Right, right. They think all of us are Gilmore Girls or something
yeah,
like
did you have the same
that.
did you when you left Connecticut, wherever you travel, did you realize, only then, when you say, "I'm from Connecticut," everyone's like, "Oh, okay, alright, so, private schools and yachts and" is that
Right. It was a very different Connecticut than what I experienced. I experienced the first friends I made in New Haven were Latin Kings, and you know what I mean? Like I grew up in a very different Connecticut than Greenwich, and I loved seeing it represented
yeah.
in your book. And I needed to see that, and a lot of what to give you a little background on uh, you know, my family, I'm of Puerto Rican and Italian descent.
Mm.
So my father's from the island. My mother grew up in New Haven, first generation. And so
I wanna go to
that
dinner at your house.
I was trying to explain to Jack that we have really amazing pizza
Yeah,
where we
that sounds
live.
like fire food, man.
Yeah, for sure. And so that is, I think, on many levels, I related it gave me a sense of pride almost seeing someone speak uh, of a Connecticut that I experienced. Do you know what I mean? Um, and Hartford, my history of Hartford, I got a scholarship to Trinity College, and I started there in '99
Wow.
and was really, I think I was probably one of the rare students there that was really involved with the community. I was working at the Boys and Girls Club. I was
Mhm.
working a lot in the city with kids, with families. Another thing that really stuck out when I read your novel was that your first work was in a tobacco field. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you
and
familiar with that work?
I am, the reason I'm familiar with it, well, the reason I wanted to bring it up was also because that's what brought a lot of Puerto Ricans to Connecticut.
Yep, Haitians
So,
during World War II.
yes, yes, exactly. So,
It
but,
was, and this is what I really deeply admire about your work. I mean, as I've been so blessed to kind of been immersed in your music since we set up this talk, and it's been such a pleasure these months. It's
oh,
almost
wow, thank you. I didn't realize you were even checking it out. That's cool.
oh
That's
yeah, it's fantastic. I felt like both of our works is kind of like the one-two punch of there's kind of this beautiful synergy. Also formally, one of my ambitions for the novel was to kind of be eclectic, fragmented, and to kind of be disobedient to the literary sort of agendas that we often hear about cohesion, uh,
mm,
devices, right? There's this kind of very capitalistic anxiety in literature to demand absolute transformation of characters at the end of the novel, right?
right, right,
So I need something has to change. I need to get my money's worth. So these characters must do something. They must improve their lives. There's this kind of project of self-improvement that we see everywhere, right? We see in fitness, in advertisement, and we see it in literature too. It's much more subtle, but it's just as tyrannical. And I just felt like, what if my characters don't improve, but are still valuable as people? Because
right.
when I look at the
That's
people I love, the communities I love, it's like, you know, improvement is miraculous. I see my communities and my family working in the same factory. My uncle worked in the Colt gun factory. My aunt worked in a clock factory, which is like the craziest metaphor. Yeah,
right.
hyper poetic, making time where she has no time for herself. Um,
Was it the Timex factory that some of your family worked at?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that,
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that in one of your poems. Yeah, I think one of the final poems in Time as a Mother. Uh,
Yes, I was listening to your work and I thought, wow, the diversity of style um in your work is so courageous and so rewarding as a listener going through the albums, hearing, punk, perhaps even ska punk, to hip hop, to hear Eminem's influence, to hear, when I started in community college at Manchester Community College.
okay.
Are you familiar with that place?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Manchester for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a little community college tucked away in, like, a pine grove, and, I would ride my bike there because I couldn't drive, I still can't drive. I'd ride my bike to class, and it was actually punk musicians that first got me into poetry.
Well, that's one of the first questions I want, and I don't have any questions written out, obviously, but I really wanted to talk about someone specifically, a punk musician who's one of my best closest friends. His name is Pat the Bunny. Are
Oh,
you
yeah.
familiar with Pat
He
the Bunny?
was legendary at the time, and he still is. I
Pat's
would
Pat stopped doing music on record or publicly about 10 years ago, and we did a record together. It was the last record Pat did together. But
wow.
we're still close friends. We still speak pretty often. And a handful of people sent me a post where you were like, "What? We need more Pat the Bunnies or missing Pat the Bunny." And that was like, I can't believe the connections that
Oh,
were made for me there. So that was yet another reason I really wanted to speak to you. I'm so curious about how you got into that world.
Yeah. Well, Hartford has mentioned one of his songs.
Yes, the first when Johnny Hobo was first discovered, I could say my friend Pepe was the first person to put out Johnny Hobo music. Uh, it was in Hartford. It was,
Well,
playing some DIY space, like playing on stairs somewhere in Hartford. Um, Pepe put out that CD, and it's called Love Song for the Apocalypse, Love Songs for the Apocalypse. And I ended up meeting Pat about the year after that, maybe. We started playing shows together in Bridgeport,
oh,
and that's how long we go back. So yeah.
wow. So yeah, I was at a community college, and when a community college, the class is filled with the world. You have a single mother, you have an octogenarian just auditing the class. You have all
Mhm.
kinds of folks, and uh, one of the group of friends I met were punk musicians, and they worshipped Pat DePunny. They were showing me these grainy. This is early, like 2008, when they're showing me these grainy videos on YouTube when YouTube was like just started. Um, of this seemingly boy playing shirtless in these with just such emotion, and they said, that was who they were idolizing, and it was at a basement punk show, um, with these folks where I first, found, Arthur Rimbaud's poetry, and
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense. Because
and
those shows, I've played so many of those DIY spaces. We'll have little corners where there maybe zines
yeah, yeah,
scattered around a table, or books, or right, like a free book section where people could take books. Or,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and I was so ignorant, of everything because I didn't know anything. Community college was just of me trying it out. I was probably I thought I was gonna drop out in, like, a week. But I end up staying because I discovered this rich intellectual life through punk music, and I picked up a copy of this poem called Drunken Boat, and I was reading, and it was written in French in 19th century in rhyming quatrains. It was translated in English, of course, and it sounded like lyrics, of course, and I said, "Hey, who's Arthur, and which band is he in?" And my friend dead, over 100 years. But if he was 17 years old when he wrote those poems, and he went on to inspire Jim Morrison, Patti Smith, so many folks. And I was listening to Anti-Flag at the time.
Okay. I just played with
Or
them a month ago.
wow. Oh my god, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Oh
I'm in a punk band now, right? So that's kind of like my thing. We're not traditional punk by any means, but I'm in that. More deeply now. So
so when I was working on the tobacco farm, I would go home and just play, Napster MP3s, you know,
hmm
off the internet. I would go to my friend's back in this day, there's only, like, one friend in your friend group that knows how to work Napster or has high-speed internet at the time.
Right. I didn't have that till I went to Trinity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was like
And
that was one of the biggest gifts Trinity gave me. You know
oh
what I
my
mean?
god. So we would make appointments at this one dude's house in the neighborhood, and we would make a list. He said, "Give me a list and come to my house," and we'd just sit there while he downloaded, these pirated songs onto and burned them on CDs, and I would listen to burned, Anti-Flag while laying in the dark after a day's working in the tobacco field, and then waking up the next morning, doing it again. So that they have such, a delicate, spot in my heart, and I volunteered at Food Not Bombs, because,
Yeah.
vegetarian, and so, I did it in Bushnell Park, in Hartford, and so my whole creative life was thanks to punk music, and it was just because I didn't have a ride home, and my friends were like, "Well, we can give you a ride, but you gotta go to a punk show first." Um,
I love that. I feel like I've checked out many interviews with you. I'm a I'm a big fan of your work, but that I've never heard that version of your origin story,
yeah,
so that's
no
really
one no
cool.
one no one asked, and they always launch into literary influences, but it was a literary influence. It was a poet, a la punk musicians, and I think at heart, I see that in your own work. You're a poet. I mean, you're a
Yes.
storyteller. There's so much about your mother, about the working class, and there's kind of this ferocity for uh, a more capacious ethics that I really appreciate in your work, and the eclecticness of it. It's so courageous, because I think I teach in a graduate program, and I don't know if it's the same in music world, but right away we have these 22, 23-year-old very young writers, and right away they want to establish a brand. They want to
Right.
establish a
Right.
style, right? And I think that anxiety to kind of establish something so quickly actually damages their growth, right? Because they say, "Well, I'm not this, I'm this," and
Right.
then
It's
they
a very capitalistic mentality. It's like
yeah,
you have to go out into the marketplace and establish your brand. And I would absolutely say the same about your first novel. Was like, that's courageous. Going about it the way you did without, I don't know. I look at it as shifting genres the way you wrote. You could look at the entire novel as a poem, as I'm sure many people have told you before, but it was also, I mean, I don't know. I look at it. I also come from hip hop and a major, and I have a lot of questions about what hip hop's influences had on you, because you do mention um, on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. One of my favorite parts is mentioning "Many Men" by 50 Cent. You have a beautiful scene with Trevor going back to this 50 Cent song over and over again. And then in one of the newer poems, you mentioned Little Peep
yeah, yeah,
uh, on the poem Not Even. And that was kind of like, like what is hip hop for you?
yeah. That's a great question. Thank you so much. You're asking questions no one has ever asked. This is so amazing. Well, Blue Peep is really interesting because came, when he was able to bring he wasn't the first to do it, but he was able to start to bring in punk and hip hop total fusion, to find a comfort between the two. But it made perfect sense because they were always anti-establishment modes of articulation, lyrically invested both sides, coming from the margins and interested in youth culture, and so I think it's inevitable that that merging happens. And now there's a lot. There's Nothing Nowhere up in Vermont, who is merging a lot of that work.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I should say really quickly before you continue. When I first read that poem, I shared it with one of Peep's main producers, Nedarb, right away. I was like, I want you to know that the legacy, it goes beyond just what is seen. I mean, what Peep has inspired in other ways. I wanted to show Nedarb what his friend's work who his friend had touched with his work. Do you know
oh,
what I mean? And that's what I chose to share that poem right away with Nedarb.
oh,
So that
thank
was cool.
God. That's so what I saw the documentary, and it was so beautiful that we got to see the intellectual richness of his home life, and particularly his grandfather.
Right, right.
Sharing
Mm.
him the works of Babel, and it make total sense that these storytellers come from a multiple genre traditions, oral traditions. I see that in your work and in how you use hip hop to kind of decelerate or accelerate the songs, right? And there's I hear I'm maybe this is particular to the time I was growing up. I hear Bone Thugs and Harmony in your work, of course, Eminem. Um, and
I
50 Cent was huge at the time. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I should say, just for clarification, I'm I'm more inspired by the people who inspired them. So
Oh,
Freestyle Fellowship. I'm a bit older than you, so Freestyle Fellowship out of Los Angeles really created that chopping, jazzy, fast style, and that's my biggest influence. So there's a whole movement out of South Central LA called the Good Life. I'd really highly recommend you check out this. documentary called This Is the Life,
Okay.
by Ava DuVernay, which is really, yeah, check that out at some point if you can. It's called This Is the Life. And that's really like the scene I came out of with hip hop. That's my biggest influence for that. So,
Wow. So the fast pacing from the hip hop and the fast pacing of punk music, I felt like it made perfect sense that they would coincide one day in this beautiful Venn diagram. And you
right.
definitely
When you hear Bad Brains sing Pay to Come, I mean, HR is rapping, in my opinion. It's
yeah.
some fast stuff.
I live in Western Massachusetts where, of course, Emily Dickinson lived. And we have a lot of kind of DIY, you know, strange, beautiful, eclectic art and music here. And there was a band that's just started a few years ago that it was a punk band that did covers of Emily Dickinson songs.
What's that band called?
It fell apart during COVID, but I think they're trying to get back on it. I forgot the name. It was borrowed from one of her poems, but because she borrowed her rhythm, the rhythm of her line was borrowed from church psalms. So
Okay.
the staccato rhythm is embedded into it. So it was perfect for punk music, right? You know, shall I compare my life to a loaded gun? It was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah, exactly.
oh my God, it's so wild. It sounded just like, Anti-Flag, and you slow it down, it could sound like Fugazi. It was crazy.
All
Uh,
right.
but 50 Cent was so huge. He was in our community, coming from New York as bootleg CDs, right? So we knew him as kind of an underground king. And what was so inspiring to me when I first heard it was, at least to me, he was the first artist to use gunshots as beats, right? To incorporate it in his music.
Yes. Yes,
And
for
I
sure.
remember it blew our minds in the community. But I was also interested in how the gangster rap as a genre became kind of a vehicle for folks in the white suburbs, particularly young white men, to kind of borrow and appropriate that vehicle to express their anger. It was a fascinating anthropological observation I had growing up, where they were they were living. In Connecticut is so fascinating because you only need to drive 30 minutes to go from absolute poverty to mansions. And that's not
Hmm.
true in some cases in other parts of America where you need to drive 2 hours, 3 hours just to change the environment. But because everything is so in close proximity, you can do that. And so I had the in retrospect, the benefit of seeing such a great swath of American life, and to go from Hartford, where the CDs were being bootlegged and passed out of sold out of people's apartment windows, to Glastonbury or Rocky Hill, Coventry, and then you see like these wealthy white boys, dedicating themselves to 50 Cent. And I saw
Hmm.
with this kind of tradition, where the majority of people who could afford the concert tickets were white men, young white men. And you can see that hip hop was a vehicle to express a kind of hyper masculinist anger. And of course, the performers know that economically. They know who their priority, primary audience is. And so they perform as well. So there's a distortion on both ends. And it's really fascinating that capitalism becomes the crux of distorting bodies and ideas into this kind of hypermorphed bridge, the sonic bridge. Excuse me. And so I was just so fascinated by that. It was to see Whiteness borrow this. I wonder if you felt the same way, or you saw
Oh, I
this.
have. Yeah, that's such. I'm glad you brought that up that way. Another quick point I wanted to bring up: 50 Cent ended up moving up to Farmington, Connecticut,
Right.
in into
Or the
Mike
mall.
Tyson's into Mike Tyson's old house, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it became news in all these suburban uh local newspapers. It became news that 50 Cent had moved to Farmington. You know what I mean? This is like after the vitamin water
Yeah.
millions were made. But yes, absolutely. And I think that's actually a part of the history of hip hop. I mean, hip hop was taken by an industry and fed back to the suburbs in order to become pop music. You know what I mean? It was fed back to the suburbs by white executives. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And it was also sort of manipulated as an art form by them because what there was this influence saying, this is what people want. They want to experience a lifestyle that they'll never have. So it actually sort of took out, um, it sort of concentrated the violence and sort of other elements of hip hop that were not always a part of it and that are, you know, maybe got pushed down to the underground in some ways. Some of the more poetic and jazzy elements of hip hop and, uh, what was really sold to the suburban white youth was the violence,
Yeah.
for,
Became a kind of almost fantasy, right?
yeah,
And it
exactly.
and it kind of coincided with everything else that they were being sold, the movies, you
Right.
know, and it was interesting that it was an outlet. It was kind of like the equivalent of Call of Duty in many video games. It becomes an
Right.
outlet for the violent expression. And when I would see these young white men fight, right, and it was
Hmm.
so fascinating. And I wonder if you've experienced this, where I felt like this was how this kind of propagandic hip hop's final expression revealed itself when you watch them fight and the N word would come out.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were
Yeah. I did not live in many, um, you know, I lived in many super diverse neighborhoods. And yeah, being Puerto Rican, um, that's a very common thing, right? It's like being Latino in urban areas. You grew up hearing the N word at all times, right? That's how we speak to people we love. When we grew up, I had to, I had to take that out of my vocabulary. I believe, like for me, growing up with people, um, when we were comfortable enough to speak that way, amongst each other, that was because that was our peers, friends, people we loved. And then I spent time in prison.
Mm,
When I spent time in prison was the first time I really saw, um, everybody. That was that word was just used to speak of any man, no matter what race, what background, any man. That word was used and that's prison culture. Uh, and that's something you have to understand. You're not going to be like, hey, can you please stop using that? You know, when you're in a prison space. I was locked up in Niantic in this Connecticut State Prison, and it was an interesting thing to witness because pretty much anyone had the pass in there. It wasn't a thing that was ever an issue. That's how people spoke. And yeah, I saw, uh, you know, I don't love using the term white because I think it's just this fabricated, um, you know, race, kind of like this kind of cultureless idea. But for lack of a better term, I'm gonna use the term white. I saw people who consider themselves white guys using that amongst the general population without any uh, pushback because that was accepted in the prison space. Um, but yeah, I can imagine seeing white guys fight and toss that word around like that. Yeah.
in the suburbs, right? And it's like and it's interesting that when they're angry, it was that language that they borrowed, right? So they
Mm,
an acceptable lexicon amongst themselves, right? It was just not there. So they're borrowing something, to your point, that was fed to them. And so when the anger was was expressed into the world, it expressed through the language of hip hop. And it was just two white guys fighting, and you would hear the N-word go back and forth. And here I am, kind of, because I work in the farms in the suburbs. You meet folks, you stay, and then you enter these communities, and I'm like, wow, where am I? It's just like the disorientation of being in Connecticut is mimetic of the disorientation of being in America.
Yes, it's it's a it's a very interesting point. Like I see that in the all the writing that you do about Trevor, and Trevor's father, um, you know, I that the working class white outskirts of the cities in Connecticut, that it reminded me of people. Trevor, the character of Trevor reminded me of people I've met, specifically people I've met in prison. Like in my mind, there was one man I met from Windsor in prison, who was a really charming kid from that area, who had been in prison basically his entire life. Um, that's who I pictured in my mind every time I read about Trevor, and every time I read about Trevor in your books. And so
That's what I was
yeah.
hoping. That was what I was hoping to showcase, that to your point, that whiteness is shifts as well. And what I witness of white folks in Connecticut was very different than what Mark Twain witnessed. And
Right, exactly. In the insurance era, when Hartford was really the insurance capital and was a very successful city at that time.
and
I was
whiteness, the idea that whiteness shifts is so important. And I think that's what I was. One of my goals was the novel, because once upon a time, Italians and Irish were not considered white in this country.
exactly. There's a book, How the Irish Became White.
Yeah,
It's an important book in American studies, and I think about that often, like the malleable nature of whiteness, how it's been created, how really it's connected to class more than anything. How you could, my mother is my mother's Italian, and I wondered if she knew that in the late 1800s, Italians were being lynched publicly in New Orleans. Do you know what I mean? The KKK killed Italians as well. The KKK hated all Catholics at one point. Are the KKK, are they the keepers of whiteness? Are they do they decide what whiteness is? When you eventually break out of a certain class, are you considered white if you have light enough skin? Like these are questions, and I think about that often when it comes to Latin American history, where there have been, for instance, dictators in the Dominican Republic that have tried to, lighten their skin to seem whiter than they are, but mostly their power and class has determined their whiteness.
right,
Uh,
right. And
I,
how class affords them the ability to change their
right, exactly. And I think that is more in Latin America, where mestizaje and mixture is such an important part of our entire culture. It's less about race there. It really is more formed in class.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Is it? Yeah,
whether, yeah,
that's makes total sense in my experience growing up, because when your class determines the lexicon and the codes you use. And so, the prison in many ways is a closed class where there's a closed ecosystem and a new code is introduced. It has its own laws, similar to the military.
right.
Anytime you have a closed system, different lexicons come through in a way that ignores the larger lexicon. And that's part of its detriment and part of its power too. And people, the communities involved, self-empowering themselves towards that. And
Right. It's really interesting in Connecticut, because my culture, my Puerto Rican culture, has a big influence on prison culture in Connecticut specifically, and I think in all of the Northeast, I would say, or most of the Northeast. For instance, what some people call a spread in prison is, breaking up crackers and cheeses and things from commissary, ramen noodles, and making kind of like what would look like a stuffed bread and putting it in. You have to, in prison, you're fed dinner at 4 p.m. So you're hungry by the time real dinner time happens. So what that stuffed bread of sorts that was made out of all the commissary meats and cheeses and crackers and ramen, we call that in Connecticut prisons, we call it mofongo, like the
Oh,
traditional Puerto Rican meal of plátanos, of plantains that are mashed and filled. So seeing Puerto Rican culture have such a big impact on prison culture was an interesting thing for me as well. Being Puerto Rican and them knowing I was Puerto Rican and calling me Bori and giving me a loaf of bread for no reason, those were things where I'm like, oh, this is a completely different culture. Another thing was the way we talked about the outside world in there, we called it the world.
mm.
We knew that there was a whole different culture in there and different things were accepted in there. So,
Well,
yeah.
I hear in both of our experience of growing up in, late 20th century Connecticut, is this kind of this encounter with the blurring of semiotics, like the fixed system of signs and symbols, where we're told that this is white, this is rich, this is poor, this is
Hmm.
progress, this is bad, this is good. We're fed all this through the propaganda of education, and yet we were offered, in retrospect, maybe it didn't feel that way at the time, a kind of really generous, subversive learning lesson of what the world really was. And I realized with the first flag I remember seeing was a Puerto Rican flag. And if
I
you
can
know,
see that. You're from a very Puerto Rican area.
and not only that, but people were so proud of that flag, right? So
Right.
you saw it on vans, you saw it stitched on people's jeans, you saw it tattooed on their arms, it was hung outside their car windows. I mean, yeah, if I didn't know any better, which I didn't, I thought I was in Puerto Rico. America where, right? I
Hmm.
came years old, and so the first memory of me seeing a flag was a Puerto Rican flag. I saw it every day, multiple times a day. And not only that, I realized that it's not so much about what is dictated as racial through the visual symbols, um,
Hmm.
but through class and migration and history, right? Because the Puerto Ricans I knew, some had blonde hair, blue eyes.
That's right.
But
That's
the
right. There's no one look to Puerto Ricans. I went to one of my friends, he was dark Puerto Rican. His brother, brother from the same parents was light, very light. So we grew up this way in racially diverse spaces. And that's what all we've ever known is mestizaje. That's our whole culture.
Right.
So yeah.
But the essentialism, as I experience it in the larger, more mainstream culture, seems to me so reductive, and I think a lot of it is like, wow, what do we hear politicians talk about these simplified terms, and it's this problem of essentialism. It's like,
Mm.
what is the one thing that makes you one thing or another? And I think growing up the way we grew up, I realized there's no one thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we face. And it's oversimplification. And the
Yeah.
human beings are not simple. And I think that's something I've taken from your work that I appreciate so much is that it lives within liminal spaces between culture, gender, class, sexuality, identity in general, right? You don't there are so many, you know, I think Jack, before we started speaking, Jack was like, I was very surprised that you picked Ocean. Ocean's so soft spoken. I was like, Ocean's hard as fuck. Fuck that. Soft
Oh,
spoken. There, Ocean's writing to me is, to me, your writing is also a lot about violence and war and the violence of nature and it's about all the spaces between, and that's what I really relate to. So I've never felt like one thing in my life, Do you know what I mean? And
Wow,
so,
Ceschi, you're gonna make me weep here. That's the most accurate and kindest thing anyone has ever said about my work.
I'm honored to be able to tell you. I really am.
Because that's truly how I feel, you know, and it's not something that I think is savory to say just out the gate in any interview, which is why it never comes up. But because you brought it up, I must say that many people say many things about me and my work. A lot of it is soft-spoken, gentle, kind, compassionate. I'm very grateful of that. But at my core, I'm truly very tough. And
Hell yeah. Yeah,
a lot
absolutely. I see that.
Thank you. I feel very seen. But I think because of how I was raised in that specific area of the world that we both know so well, um, you know, one not only has to become hard, but one has to portray hardness. And I had to undo a lot of that because I wasn't comfortable. I was not me. But I saw my friends transform themselves in order to protect themselves.
That
Right?
makes total
I
sense.
saw
Exactly.
young men of all walks of life, of all skin tones, kind of develop a shield, and then I was the friend that that shield came down with, right? I don't know
Right.
why, you're gonna have to ask them, but, you know, I would be the one where they would get into fights where, you know, they'll lift a shirt and there's a 9 millimeter out, and then
Mhm.
I was a friend that 5 minutes later, I saw them crying in their car, in the steering wheel, you know, and I'm so and I think just seeing all that made me realize that everyone is vulnerable. In
Right. And we're all facing trauma. And a lot of us, living in situations where we've lived, and seeing the things we've seen, we shouldn't have seen these things so early in life in a lot of cases. And yeah, we're a lot of times we struggle to show that publicly. Um, I think
for the time.
having an outlet like writing, like rapping, like music becomes that out. But sometimes you just have to cry to your friend in
Yeah.
quiet. And
And storytelling is a way to reclaim the propaganda, right? Because you know, you look up sadness in a dictionary, there's maybe 2 definitions, maybe 3. You look at the OED, there'll be more. But, you know, no more than 4 or 5, and we know that there's so many definitions and feelings, and the irony is that we use words, which is a very limiting form, right? Each word just has a few definitions, and that's the point. The point is discernment. One word must be different than another, and so we're working with a medium that has been narrowed down and reductive, but we're using them together to be expansive and
right.
inex
And how
and
do you capture the depths of grief without all these different emotions, without violence, without rage, without the silence and the quiet? The depths of grief. I mean, you know, I think when I picked up your book, I had lost 7 friends the year before, whether it be to opiates or suicide or murder or accidents, whatever. I had an intense year, um, of losing people. And my grief has never stopped. And the way you, and actually, this is one of the things I really want to talk to you about as well is your timeline of writing your last 2 books. Um, from what I could gather, you finished your novel around the time when your mother had was dying. Is this what was happening at that time in your life?
I was about I was about to go on ready to go on tour. I wrote the book, from 2016 to 2018, 15 to 18, 3 years, and, uh, it was gonna come out in June 2019, and I was getting ready to go on tour, and in March 2019, she was diagnosed with terminal stage 4 cancer,
Yeah.
and, you know, it's kind of wild. She went on medication and it helped. She was unable to walk in March, and then by June and July, she was walking, and we all thought, my goodness, the miracle of modern medicine, and which it was. But cancer is such a mysterious and monstrous disease that from July she was fine, August, and by November 2nd she was gone. So my book came out amongst the diagnosis and her death, the novel, and all within 7 months.
So this is as a writer, this is your peak of success and probably the most difficult time of your life at the same time. And I couldn't help but think about that. Now looking back at time as a mother and reading those poems, I couldn't help but think about where you were in your career at that time as well. I hate to even bring up the term career, but you know what I'm saying. You're reaching your peak as a writer, your first novel, and you're having to deal with the hardest loss anyone ever has to deal with, really. And I don't know, I just how do you even put that kind of long-term grief into words, or the juxtaposition of feelings? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I
think,
think language is
yeah.
kind of chemistry. It
Mm.
the dynamism of it is that if you put two things next to each other, the reader will create meaning, and the meaning is most of the time already there. But it was very challenging. But in a way, it was not completely new. Like you, I've lost many people. We had the
Yeah.
opioid epidemic in 2003, 2004 when I was experiencing it. And it started in Stamford, Connecticut with Purdue Pharma. So it went right up the highway.
Right.
We had that before before it was cool for politicians to mention it, before it was a term. So I would lose friends, and you probably have the same feeling, but I try to explain this to folks who don't understand, I think they still feel very jarred, and I think it is very jarring. You have to imagine in 2003, 2004, somebody dies from an OD. Their family is so ashamed, and sometimes they only know they were an addict, or they were struggling with addiction when they die. So
Right.
there were no obituaries, no wakes. People were
Right.
cremated. The families left town. There was no
People
face
disappeared. People disappear. They're ghosts. It
right off
was,
the face of the earth, and you feel insane because you're like, "Did even know?"
you feel wrong. You feel wrong. I lost a friend 2 weeks ago, right? A close friend. We're waiting on autopsy report, right? You feel wrong because there's nothing you could do other than you try to keep their memory alive in some way. Sometimes it's just so little you could do. Someone disappears off of the face of the earth. And sometimes they're a text message in your phone. During pandemic, it was extreme. Sometimes, there's someone texting you and their number in your phone one day, and suddenly that number will never write to you again. And
I had to delete them right away. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand it.
I can't. I'm the opposite. I might have that weird guilt
I
to
can't.
delete them.
Oh, I'm so I just can't bear it to look at it. It's just a record of life. But yeah, so grief was like yourself. It was kind of normal and but also surreal. You think there was a moment when my mother died, 2000 November. About 2 months later, I did all the funeral stuff. And by the way, I have a 10 years younger brother. So
Okay.
I lost my mother at 28. He lost his mother at 18. And so he moves in with me now. He used to live with her. So I'm kind of like a weird dad as well.
Oh, I didn't
So
know that.
there's a sort of custodial um sort of objective to grief for certain members of the family. And for me, I had to tend to so much that I was on autopilot for so long, and there were times when it broke, the dam broke, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and I think, "Oh, I gotta tell my mom this." And I would
Yeah.
go downstairs, I turn the corner, turn on the light, and only taking 2 steps into the living room did I realize I'm like, fuck, she's dead.
Yeah.
And you just collapse, like, and I just wanted to have this urge to run as fast as I can in every direction on the compass to find her. And I'm like, she's got to be somewhere. But I also think, you know, a blessing in disguise, if you will, growing up in the recession, in the opioid epidemic, among so much violence. One of my first memories is watching a boy playing basketball getting held up by a fake pistol. It was a lighter, but it looked just like a pistol, a revolver. And so that the lighter of the gun lighter ends up in the novel as well. It's I never
Mhm.
even they existed until this moment. I was like, 13 on the basketball court, and somebody owed somebody money, as is always the case. And there's a commotion. 10 minutes later, there's this gun held to this kid's head, and he's just pissing. He's wetting his pants. And it's just, you see I still see to this day, see the basketball shorts going dark, the red basketball shorts turning maroon in the center, and just weeping. And then it turned out it was a lighter, but I was like,
Mhm.
that feeling, I think I tried to carry into the work. And I think this is what I mean when I said I felt really privileged and honored that you said the work is hard, because as gentle as I like to live my life, um, what I've experienced of the world is not so gentle. And I live as a Buddhist, as a pacifist, as a meditator. I do this mindfully because of what I've seen. I wasn't born like
Exactly. That makes so much sense. It's what you have to do to save yourself, to take care of yourself. I get
I
that.
mean, I was culturally Buddhist, but I never knew what the hell it was. As far as I knew, we just had to give a portion of our rations of fruit to to this, figurine,
Yeah,
on
I should bring this up. So I was able to play a concert in Hanoi in
oh,
2011, and it was such a chaotic experience, and I'm getting rushed around on motorcycles and mopeds, and watching entire families on a moped. I saw a family of 4 on a moped. you know, uh, just just the it was an amazing experience to be out there, but it was chaotic. At the same time, there one of the things I noticed that really stood out were these spaces, were these almost empty storefronts everywhere that were built um as altars. So
mm,
there were altars inside, but within the altars, people were doing paper mache versions of things they wanted. So there were a lot of paper mache iPhones
oh,
hanging
yeah.
around all around Vietnam. Um, in these, and there may be a high end fashion, a high end store from France next to this empty um, white walled space were just an altar of things uh, to to the Buddha.
Wow.
Which was something
Well, you know what that
that's something that's one of my main memories from Vietnam. So it's funny that you brought that up.
glad you brought that up, because that the ritual of burning, those things is a grief ritual. And so this
Mm.
is where, um, Buddhism, kind of like Catholicism, where Buddhism mix with paganism in Vietnamese culture. So, you know, the Buddhism, the idea of those paper things is that you burn it for the dead. You burn
Oh,
you
okay.
burn it down to the underworld, right? So it started off with money. You would buy $1 million notes. Um, it's actually a very sad, the modern rendition of it is very sad for me. Not that I'm judging it, but I just feel great sadness when I witness it, because what turned to banknotes or hell notes, that you burn down to your loved ones. So it's similar to, the Egyptian pharaohs or, ancient Neolithic burial ceremonies where you bury the loved one with all of their prized possessions.
The
Well, here
riches, right? Yeah.
it's aspirational, right? So it's quote unquote hell money or fake money, and it's millions of dollars. And you go to the altar and you burn it down to them. You send it down with fire.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Thank you for
that,
explaining that. That's completely changed my perspective on that. I was so
yeah. So the
curious.
Buddha is only interested in fruit, but the money
Okay.
is for the ghosts, right? And so in Buddhism, so the thing is, what I was getting at was I didn't know, and I didn't really care. It was just kind of like my mom was like, "Here's some oranges, put it on the altar." That was my whole childhood. But Connecticut was what made me try to learn Buddhism because I literally walked into the library one day, because I said, I need a way out. Either it's going to be drugs, which I was already doing, either I'm just going to borrow one of my friend's guns and just peace out,
Mhm.
or I need to find a way to stay here well. And Buddhism was the only thing that was closest to me. I had no idea what it was. But I said, there's a bunch of books on it in this section of the library. I'm going to learn. And so it was a method for me to try to make sense, but also build a toolkit for myself to deal with the stressors that involved growing up where I was. And so Connecticut taught me how to think, how to seek out another method, an alternative way of being. And, because of its grief. So it's funny that you saw that because when we give the fruit to the Buddha, it's not for some god. It's not like the Buddha's starving and waiting on some 12-year-old kid in Hartford to give them oranges. It's a meditation. So it's kind of like yoga. It's kind of like a mindful exercise. It's like you're offering something to another entity. And so it's a practice of generosity. And it's sometimes
Oh,
easier because it's always available. You don't so in Buddhism, we say that it's actually a great, precious thing to have the chance to help. You don't people who are absolutely wealthy live in ways that they don't even have a chance to be of service to some people, right, in their daily life. Everything's taken care of, everything's done, everything's great. But folks who witness suffering has this beautiful opportunity to engage with it and to use their bodies to transform a certain scenario, even something very small. And so the altar is just kind of like the practicing range. It's kind of like if you don't have anybody who needs help, just go to the altar, do this every day so that you're prepared to be of service to other people, to humanity, when it comes up, right?
that makes so much more sense than my initial reading. That makes so much more sense from what I know about Buddhism.
Yeah, and
That's
so the hell money turns to BMWs, Rolexes, Louis Vuitton, all paper, right? Uh,
Mhm.
and so what makes me really sad when I go into Vietnam was I would see these people grieve, and there's a kind of aspirational powerlessness that I couldn't do anything for you. And it's very class-based, right? Folks
Mhm.
who have very little money can never afford a mansion. But when their loved one dies, they can finally give them a mansion in paper and send it down to hell, which in Vietnamese pagan beliefs resembles very much like this world, like a mirror world. But it's much tougher, right? So they always need our help. And so we take the material realms, things, the treasures of the earthly realm that we couldn't give them because capitalism makes it impossible.
Right.
Some folks, so we give them when they die, we can finally give them everything we work so hard to give them. That breaks my heart seeing that.
That's that makes thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know that. And that was one of my biggest memories, playing out there. I mostly played when I played, it ended up being about 75% expats from like Australia and England who came out to the hip hop show. Um, it wasn't for the community until I did play. I ended up we ended up playing Lao, and that was a street jam where we played to a bunch of kids, and we played after boy bands and girl bands that had full dance routines, and they put me up there with an acoustic guitar and my raps, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? But yeah, that was an amazing experience to be out there.
You know the history of Cambodia and Laos and psychedelic rock.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
I love specifically Cambodian psych rock that I know of. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah. Jungle Fever. It's that
hmm
it all came from when American soldiers were on R&R. You know, they would.
oh yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Which kind of leads to another part of your history, right? I mean, that's a huge part of your history, and that's another reason why, war seems to be a recurring theme in your work. I mean, even there's even a poem in Time as a Mother where it's like where you're speaking about the era of the Iraq War, and I'm pretty sure you're talking about watching a. From what I could gather, from what I remember, you're talking about the execution of Saddam Hussein as well. Are you talking about there's one scene, it's a long poem. There's one scene where you're talking about the hanging of what it sounds like a dictator
Yeah.
is um
They
so
found him in the tunnel.
right. And you're bringing back a lot of you even bring back songs. You're talking about Ashanti and Ja Rule songs on the radio, right? You're talking about you're bringing back eras. I mean, what is as someone who was born out of war in some ways, um, I guess I'm coming back to this idea of violence. How do you see war's role in your writing, and how does it um and do you see growing up in a place like Hartford uh, uh, as another kind of war? Do you see the different types of wars that we go through out here in these areas? I don't know. That's not a great question, but
The beautiful question.
so
By the way, you're such an astute reader. I mean, the professor in me is I'm like A plus.
I,
You
I
must
almost went. I almost went down that path. I almost went
wow,
down
you
that
must have
path.
been such a pleasure to have in class as a peer and as a student. And well, but the classroom never ends. I tell my students this. I'm like, you're here for 3 years, but this is just the ramp. This is just
Right.
the on ramp. You have to do this for the rest of your life if you're really game for it. That's what it takes. It's a wager. This art, both what you do and what I do, is a wager. You wager everything. You
Yes.
have and where that falls, whatever success means for you, for every person is different. But the most satisfying thing is knowing that you have given everything you have, most likely for very little return, right? And that's
All right.
what you're
All right.
happy with. And throughout history, both for musicians and writers, there's folks who wagered it all and got little left in their lifetime, and maybe they were read later on. And some, wagered it all and got more than they could ask for. But you have to be prepared to lay everything out. There's no halfway. And I've written every book of mine as if it's my last. It sounds very dramatic, but I'm a dramatic person. And but I feel
I
good.
feel that so deeply, though. I cannot. But that also comes from us seeing so much loss, experience so much loss.
I
We,
went to
I
the
always
Baptist.
have my moments when I'm like, "Is this gonna be my end? I got to be next, so I got to make this as good as I can." You
Well,
know.
I love that. Growing up, we would go to the Baptist church to get free food. My mother and and my mother was oblivious to the lectures, but I was able to filter some of it, and I kept hearing Noah's Ark. And I think the myth of Noah's Ark was so important to me because it was a wonderful project, right? This idea that what would you put into a vessel to survive the apocalypse? And I kind of took that as a metaphor for my book. It's like I hope I can write more books, but every one I write, all of my best has to go into it. Nothing left behind. no fluff, just all the good things, and leave nothing, for the safe. One of my favorite writers, Annie Dillard, uh, when she was asked about teaching, she says, I have to give my students and the world everything I know. If I save it in the safe, one day I will open that safe and find only ashes.
Mm.
And I felt that in your work. And there's an urgency. One of my favorite moments, the lyrics are incredible. The chord progressions, I mean, there's so much dynamism in your work. But one of my favorite moments is in the recordings is hearing your breath. When the song starts to break, right? There's a recent song, was it 2020 BC?
Yes, yes. That was recorded live, I did that in one take, and we
Wow.
kept it. We
Wow. I
kept
mean,
it.
the way the crescendo builds and the breath comes in. Um, to me, maybe some recorders will say, "Oh, that's like a very mainstream recording artist would say that that's the error, right? We don't want."
Right, right.
But to me, that's what makes the song. That's what makes the artist come through. Is that, wait a minute, in the midst of this story, there's somebody breathing. That breathing and storytelling coincide. One depends on the other. That the fuel of the story is not only just the life experience, but the breath, the lung. And it reminded me of one of my favorite photographers, Nan Golden, when she says, "My best photographs come when the camera creates an error." Right? They come
Mm.
from the technical mistakes. And I felt the same with my own writing. I was taught how to write. It was very boring. I never thought I would ever want to be a writer. But when I started to listen to music, when I started to listen to hip hop, punk music, when I started to listen to the vernacular of people in my neighborhood speaking, I found that the language was actually incredibly dynamic, right? Coming up with new terms, was incredibly like the drug dealers in my neighborhood use Nikes as a way to sell weed, right? So,
Mm.
hey, you want some Uptowns? And so the Uptowns,
That's the
want,
triple A. That's the triple
right?
A.
During that era, everybody was wearing those, right? So the most
Yeah.
common thing, you want some Uptown and you need laces, right? So you need some hardware, right? Right? Throw in some
That's the
laces.
I hate to shift it again, but that reminds me of your poem Old Glory,
Mhm.
where you're talking about, I mean, it's based, and I've heard you in other interviews bring this up as well, but the violence embedded into slang and also just English, I think just like American culture. And what that at the same time, I'm sorry, maybe can you speak about that a bit, about that poem and that perspective? Because you're talking about, like, you crushed it, you killed it, like the way that we celebrate violence
Right.
in America as something, it's victory. I mean, I think that's completely entangled with capitalism as well, right? So.
Absolutely. To smash the competition, right? That annihilation is a form of success. And I think it has roots all the way to Manifest Destiny and Andrew Jackson. This idea that progress is the elimination of nature, right? That man's, the settler colonial project was to transform nature. And there was a propaganda there too. The early painters, right? Even the photographers like Ansel Adams, those nature photography was to show, right, the Eastern metropolis that this virgin land is ready to be settled, to be transformed. And you transform that with the attempted genocide of native peoples. And so if we go all the way back, we realize that violence is the equation of success in the American project. And we saw this in the Vietnam War too. The Vietnam War was one of those interesting wars where land and cities were not necessarily signs of progress. The capturing of hills and jungles meant nothing in this war, unlike in World War II. So you would American elements would capture a hill and then just leave it the next day, and it would just be recaptured. So after a while, American military policy was body count.
Mhm.
You measure the war success by how many Vietnamese bodies there were. And of course,
The currency of bodies.
the currency of bodies. So of course, this went from, enemy elements to civilian elements, because who's to say, right? The blurring of what's an enemy and what's a person started to feed into this quantifiable measurement of success. So to me, I think this a larger way to answer your question about war is that for me, war is the most common thing in our species. And for as long as there has been soldiers, there has been poets, going all the way back to the Iliad, to Gilgamesh, our great,
Hand in
great,
hand.
right?
Right.
Thousands of
Zizek
poets.
speaks about that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Amazing, right? And I think that the idea of that is it's important for me in my work to normalize what has already been normal. But publishing industry works in a way where, so much of it is determined by middle class executives and agents historically, right? Now there's much more diversity there, but historically, similar to what you said about, hip hop,
Mhm.
it's middle class folks pushing what they find valuable. And so they started to just publish what they know. So you have all these novels about, bored men around campuses having affairs for most of them. We all read that. We're all forced to read them. And I'm like, and that was considered normal. And the refugee story, the story of violence was considered exotic. And what I insist on is that actually the suburban drama is the exotic story relative to human history. It just hasn't
Absolutely.
appeared so because of the hegemonic powers of information dissemination, which
And
is
what is and coming back to that, I see you as a deeply American writer. I see and as I see you as representing an America that I know, that I recognize. And what is America? What is your America? You know what I mean? I see that in your writing, and I read it my own way, but it's like, why is, for instance, when there's a president saying they want to make America great again, or they want to bring back an America, that's not what I value. As someone who's been lucky enough to travel this world because of music, what I value um is your your version, your the version we grew up with, the multiculturalism, um
what
the
you're hitting on there was really important, because I think what your work does so well, and what I attempt to do, whether it's successful or not, I can't say, is to remember thoroughly. And I think part of the battleground, if you will, to borrow the metaphor, I don't condemn the violent language. I think it's important for me to make clear. Um, People ask me, "You're anti-violent language. Do you have alternatives?" I said, "I don't think there in the American lexicon there is no better alternative to express celebratory
Mhm.
joy." Right? What are you gonna say?
Yeah, you're
Like,
just pointing out something that has become standardized.
I
And it's
use it as a
also,
girl.
there is no, I mean, I think the mythology of the fierce individual has
Mm,
been built by violence, right? There is no, you know, that fierce individual probably had a gun. You know
mm,
what I'm saying? Like that, the idea of the winner in history, in of manifest destiny, this like God given right to other people's land, and like these ideas of American mythology have been built via violence, and all you're doing is pointing that out from a perspective, from your unique perspective as someone who came here, who was not born here, who learned the language so incredibly well, to the point where you have a, yeah, that's something that amazes me about your writing, is that you have such a different perspective on these same words that we all use kind of casually because we've been conditioned by hegemony, right?
right.
And so, yeah.
I mean, David Foster Wallace has this great speech where he talks about the writing and paying attention to language is like fish finally paying attention to water.
Right.
Fish
Right.
move through the water and they don't think, it's, "Oh, this is my life," but in fact, it's a thing. You're moving through it, and language works in the same way that anyone could pay attention to it. And I think that sonnet, Old Glory, was important for me because I could borrow the poetic tool, the Shakespearean, Petrarchan tool, this of the tradition, of the Anglo tradition, and kind of use it to stack these phrases. Because when we use them in the day, we they're diffracted and we almost don't hear them. But if you stack all of them together, the violence and the horror of it is quite palpable. Um,
Mhm.
and when I was trying to explain this to my aunt, in translating this into Vietnamese, she was horrified. She couldn't imagine why
Right.
anyone would use this to cheer each other on. And
It's so casual to us, right?
and yet when I try to come up with different terms for English American usage, I'm like, You know what? You killed it still kills. It still
Mhm.
works." And I think it's important for me to say, I am part of this. I am American. I do use this, but I'm interested in using the work to raise questions.
I
What
see that. I see that so deeply in your work. I mean, it is truly I mean, I mean, yeah, you just said it. You just said it out loud, but I'm just glad to hear it. That's confirmation for me. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know, to be able to be so immersed in your beautiful work. I just find myself nodding along to your music and just in absolute joy and being seen and being understood. Because I think we use that term, I'm being seen, but seeing doesn't mean you understand. And
No.
I feel like the care in how you compose your music, the plot lines through your songs, uh, they have the ambition that I share, which is that you can embrace it all, that there is no need to be selective or reductive or to boil it down or to make it easier and compatible, for a listener. When I
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I've always struggled with the brand for sure because it never felt natural to me to
I
focus on one thing.
I hope if I'm lucky enough to write more books, that every book is different. I don't wanna have a brand. The brand is the death. For the artist, the anxiety of building a brand means you have to protect the brand, and protecting that brand means you have denied yourself a creative growth. You're
Right.
finished. Once you
Building and there's something I really struggle. I've taken big long breaks between records in the past because I struggle with that idea of expectation that gets built. When something gets a little bit of attention, um, suddenly people expect one voice from you. My next record, I've taken a long time to put it out because it is. It, I made I recorded a trilogy, and it's based on my grief that I've been experiencing. Like this deep grief and the waves of grief from um, you know gratitude for the lives that have touched ours to anger and violence. And I feel like once expectations are built, sometimes people don't want to hear that the reality of the entire the what grief encompasses. And it encompasses it all of that.
Right.
There that violence and rage is a part of it. And if you sweetly edit that out, that's not reality. That's not my truth, at least. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
it's
felt a lot of frustration and rage, and I want to express that, and I've struggled to put that out. I think partially because of expectations at times, and
mm,
I'm finally like wrapping it up and like stepping it up and doing it. But I'm glad that you mentioned that because I've always seen that when an artist keeps trying to replicate something because of its um, financial success or whatever success, I think that's failure, and I think I'm with you on that.
It's easy to do, and I think it's I think you come to a fork in the road as an artist, and you say, "Are my readers right? Do I give them what they want again, or do I have something else, something ahead of me that I'm working towards?" And it's always easier to go to the former, to say, "Let me just do it again. It's a sure thing. It's already proven." But you
Mhm.
actually I think it's disrespectful to the listener and the reader to see it that way, because it assumes that what they want is it assumes that what you're making is like potato chips, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm just gonna do more potato chips, right? You can and everyone loves it, it's gonna be good. But I think it takes a lot of agency out of the reader and the listener to presume that. And so I think for me, you always lose. I think I'm okay with losing readers from project to project. But
Same. Same. I think we have to be. I mean, these are all gambles for us, and as
once
long as we're representing ourselves
because
properly.
the culture is trained to have consistency, and this is
Right.
a lot of it is capitalism, right? If you look at
Especially now. I just released a new record with a band I'm in called Co-Defendants, and, it's had the most
mm,
press and attention of maybe anything I've ever done in my life, and it's with, Fat Mike of NoFX and my friend Sam from Get Dead, and it's a totally different project for me. People, the record came out 2, 3 months ago. People are already asking for the next record, and I'm like, "Can we sit with this for a little bit?" It took a lot of life to make this record. Can we sit with this instead of churn out content the way that. And I think social media and modernity has led to these expectations, like this constant, never bored, never never rereading, more like this instant gratification thing. And I think that it becomes difficult for an artist, right? Because we do need to survive. And for me, I don't have a steady job, right? So it's tempting to just churn stuff out, but I just can't. So I don't.
yeah, you can't turn yourself into a factory. And the people who love your work never came because, you know, that you're a factory of ideas. And I think that's why genre fiction is so popular, because it does
Mm,
work like potato chips, right? You the murder mystery will be solved. You will know. Like there's a capitalistic promise to that kind of work that by the end of this book, you will know who did it. And that's as consistent as a franchise, as McDonald's and Burger King. But the work that you're
the
doing,
the payoff, the literal payoff.
yeah, yeah. But the work that you're doing, the payoff is spiritual and it's complicated, and it might not come at the end of the text.
Mm,
It becomes an accompaniment to life itself, and you can't make that fast. I wouldn't want anyone to. So I think that being invested in an alternative route, for me, it's important, because I say, many folks say, well, why don't you just do like this person or that person? It's like, well, I don't want to. I have to do it so that the wager is spent and I can go to bed at night saying, what if you lost or you won? Did you do what you wanted? Because at the end of the day, there's only one name on the book, right? And
right.
there's your name behind the tracks, behind the album. Say, did you do it the way you wanted? Did you leave anything behind? Are you on Noah's Ark or Ceschi's Ark? And then you sailing away, you're like, God, there's still so much left on land that I wanted to do. And I just don't want to have that moment. And so far, I've been able to avoid it. What I really admire, and I have to run shortly, but I want to close by just bringing back Pat the Bunny, because what I
That
really
that's I was about to bring him up. I was about to say every time Pat made a new project, it was under a new name. You notice? So it
yeah,
was almost every time,
ah,
right?
and and I find that really admirable, and I think I even find that as a kind of role model. Like to me, it's not about what great things can you do, but that can the work that you do, great or not, depending on whoever judges it, what if it's not about creating a huge body of work that you could be proud of, but that the care involved in making the work makes it possible so that you can stop and be
Right.
proud.
The curation, that's what I'm doing for my
Yeah.
solo work. My last record will be my last. It's 20 years of putting out records next year for me. And
That's cool.
and it'll be my last. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of the
That's so
body of work. I
I can
think
be
it's
at a
important to book it. And it's also the way I look at it is we can pick our own ending sometimes. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And it's we could curate it the way we'd like. And it's a difficult thing on some levels, but it also opens up entire new worlds. I think Pat did that really well. Pat was my biggest inspiration for that when it came down to that. Like Pat, when I met Pat, it was Johnny Hobo and the Freight Trains. Then it was Wingnut Dishwashers Union. Then it was Ramshackle Glory. All of those incredible projects in their own right, all different names, all different periods of this person's life, right?
Yeah.
So all captured under different names.
It was
Not
funny.
everyone can pull that off. Pat
Yeah.
pulled it off beautifully. And then
And
ended with a solo
about
record.
talk about a rejection of the brand, right? And what better
Exactly.
way to be antithetical to the brand, which is stability, a promise, cohesion, than to create new monikers for oneself, right? I think the antithesis of a brand is actually rebranding in a way.
Right.
That
The label owner in me, because I started my own label 15 years ago. The label owner, quote unquote, owner in me, that's the worst idea, right? for selling. I can't say I'm very good at selling myself, but
I can't say either. I'm lucky to have I have a publisher who does it. I don't know one thing how it works. You know, when I
right.
was selling the book, I came up with a lot of challenges. I met with 11 publishers, and I was so lucky to go with the one that said exactly what you just said. My publisher, Ann Godoff. When I first met her, she says, "So you wrote a great American novel," and this is
Yes.
a white woman in her 70s, you know, and she was the only one to say that. Other publishers were interested, but they said things like, "Oh, there's too many books in here. There's too many topics." Uh,
Mm.
did they really live like that?
That's
Or
like my exact experience with the music industry. That's really
yeah,
funny.
yeah, and
Until I
then
had one person kind of figure it out, and that's
yeah,
very recent, this year, really. So
wow. Someone said, "What would readers in the Midwest? What the?" I said, "Who are they? You mean people? You mean other human beings with, or microcosm of nervous systems? What are you talking about?" But it was a wonderful crash course to see how projects can go awry if you don't have the courage. And I say this to my students all the time. I said, "Look, you spend 3 years with me, you'll be better. You'll be a better writer, not because of me. You'll spend 3 years working on anything. It could be in your mom's basement. It could be in a school. It could be in a cabin in Vermont. If you dedicate 3 years like you are, you'll be better. Just
yes.
don't worry about that. You'll
I
get
tell
better."
that to every young artist as well, every young musician I meet, because I get a lot of questions about how to just be a DIY musician. I'm just like, you basically can't have much to fall back on. You have to go for it, and you
Yeah,
have to create, and make it the way you want. And your expectations need to only be for yourself, right? Like they should be on you. Like you can't think about anybody else when you're creating. It doesn't belong to them until you put it out.
right. You will
Then it
get better.
belongs to all of us, right? There.
Now, yeah, I've been teaching for 10 years, and I've never had a student get worse in the 3 years. And I think, but the central hope then is what? What are we getting out of this? And for me, I tell them it's courage, because you're gonna walk in a room where someone says it should be done this way. Someone else did it this way. It's a good model. You shouldn't do this. The questions that were asked about this book. There's too many endings. There's 3 endings. It doesn't start. It starts too fragmented. And I was prepared because I was already a scholar. So I said, well, here's my reference to Moby Dick, here's my reference to Marguerite Duras, Juno Barnes. And so I was able to defend it, but it took a lot of courage to tell these executives and say,
Mm,
you know, I I thought about everything you're saying, and what you're getting is my deliberate choice. Nothing is accidental. And I've learned that that's actually how a lot of folks in positions of power in industry look at something that they're excited about. The first thing they want to figure out is, was this a happy accident? Did you just kind of, blurt this out? And I found that, it's really hard to not fold and say, okay, I'll listen to you, just give me the contract so I can have a life. It was really difficult. And
mm,
what liberated me from that decision was being a poet, which, because poetry was so small, there was no money in it. I was just a small time indie press poet. And that was already the dream. My dreams were so small, right? I just wanted a little book so I can show my mom that I didn't waste my life. You know,
right.
I was so shy. I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be on the road. I didn't even want to have my author cover on the back, which is why for my first book, Nice Guy with Exit Wounds, I'm in a tank top that my friend took, because my mother begged me. She said, "Please put your photo in the book so I can show my clients at the nail salon that my son is
Ah, I love that.
I can
Love
prove it to them." It was so heartbreaking, and that's why I have a but so I think and she told me this, she didn't know what I was dealing with, the rooms and the offices and the industries that I was moving in. But she said, "Look, I don't understand what you're talking about, but one thing is clear. Before you enter a room, you have to define what winning is for you. Otherwise, they'll dangle the carrot forever, and you'll be caught into the rat race, and you'll be a puppet." This is a woman who's never been anywhere in scenarios like this outside of nail salons, right? And yet she lived a life where it taught her that you always have to know your terms before you enter a space. And for me, it was always just to have one book of poems. So when I wrote the
So
novel,
you won long ago, and so everything becomes a bonus.
everything is just a cherry on top.
You
This
know,
whole life right now is a cherry on top.
I feel that exactly. I feel that
If
exactly.
I lose it tomorrow, that's okay. I've been in worse places. I've been in, so it's all right. And I think that's what a lot of folks who don't have who are born in the dominant class, their fear is inconceivable to me, right? The fear that they have and the fear that creates the policy and the destructiveness, the possessiveness of land and property, that paranoia of losing all of that is a poison that I don't wish on my worst enemy.
Right. We'll probably never experience that. But
So I feel very blessed in that sense. I'm sure
yeah,
you
yeah, I do. The other side of that is the stress of survival when you're living the way I do. You never know
Yeah,
where
no
my
doubt.
next check is coming when it's a tough lifestyle, but I've always been a gambler, and I'd rather live this way than than have that version of success that you were just speaking.
Right, right.
Um,
It is
their version.
shows, and whether the 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 power is recognized in one's lifetime or not. Melville, the author of Moby Dick, which is weird, strange, queer, wild novel. I mean, it's just so if you
Mhm.
ever get a chance, it just starts off with a guy having depression, and then he ends up going whale hunting. It's crazy. Yeah. But it sold 1,000 copies, which is an utter failure. This is at a time where everyone was reading books. There's no Netflix or radio. And he died a complete, failure, financial loss. And now the whale, you walk into a bookstore, the Strand bookstore in New York, and fiction as a genre is under the symbol of the whale. So not only has he's entered the culture, but he's altered how the culture
Altered completely.
is
Yeah.
storytelling. Um, but we don't control that, you know. We
And
don't.
I'm curious about what he thought of his own of his own work. We
No,
can't ask like
no,
Ocean would like.
it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, and I'll just end with this because I think it's very relevant to everything we said. He was writing to Hawthorne, who was his mentor at the time, the Daniel Hawthorne Scarlet Letter, who's very successful. He was
Yes,
successful, and he was successful because Hawthorne was successful because he appealed to the British literati. So this is the 19th century. America's independent, but its cultural influence is still determined by London, right? So
makes sense. Yes,
Hawthorne was still revered within the empire. So he had a very lucrative career. Melville did not want to write the family saga, the social novel that was popular with Darwin, with Dickens, and also Darwin at the time. So he wrote this working class book about labor, and particularly aquatic labor that doesn't take place on land. It was a multiracial group of whalers, and everyone thought it was a complete betrayal because it was a huge fu to London, and it was saying that for the first time, I'm going to write a novel about American life, about American labor. It's literally the work that lights the lamps of the nation of whale blubber. So there's this
right.
kind of like, fuck you, London. I'm gonna write about what I'm not supposed to write about. And he wrote to Hawthorne, he says, this is my greatest achievement. And he said, regardless of what happens, I've written the best book of my life. And
He knew very well.
he knew very well. And I think that's what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter
As
whether
long as you know,
as long as you know, that's all that matters. If you're lucky, the culture will catch up to it. Sometimes, most of the times, it doesn't, but it doesn't matter. It's like, can you sleep at night saying that this is your greatest work? And I still live by that rule. I think to me, I've been lucky that
please always live by that because I see it.
if
And
it goes
we
away tomorrow, I'll be okay, right? I think I asked that question about like, what if it all goes? What if people hate the next book? I think that's fine as long as I was ambitious to myself and I respect the project. And I see that in your own work, and I hope you find a way to continue that. And if nothing else, you have a fan for life. I truly respect.
same big time. I think you've written some of the greatest work I've ever read. So thank you.
So much. Thank you. I thank you so much for talking. And I'm not
Thank
gonna
you
listen
so
to
much
this
for doing
because
this.
I can't stand my own voice. I'm one of those people who can't listen to their own voice, but I remember it well. And
I'm the same way. I don't like pictures of myself. I don't like my own
yeah.
voice. It's strange for being a recording artist that way, but yeah.
I can confirm that the voice is very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Same. And I appreciate your speaking voice very much. It's very soothing as well.
Like, are you still based in Connecticut?
I'm actually trying to head back. I kept my apartment there, but I was living in Vegas for a while and between San Antonio and Las Vegas at the moment, but I'm trying to get back to New Haven. So yeah, that's
Well,
the hub of the fall.
I hope to attend one of your shows one day.
I'd love to invite you. I'll let you know. I'll send the information about the next one.
Thank you so much, Ceschi, and
Thank you so much,
thank
Ocean.
you so much for having me on.
Appreciate this so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Ceschi, whoa,
What's up?
hey, whoa, that was a real privilege to hear.
Hell of a
Yeah,
conversation right there.
yeah, that was like two articulate heavyweights. Yeah, I feel really privileged to hear it in real time.
Thank you for making it happen. I really didn't think that would happen in my lifetime. The second I finished On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, I wrote a fan letter to Ocean that never reached him. As most don't. I've never, I don't do that. I
No,
don't do that very often, but but yeah, that's how much that book meant to me. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Wow. It must have been one of the best interviews he's ever had, because you really
I think I
you come,
surprised him.
yeah, I think, because you come from his area, you understand where he came from, therefore because environment makes the man as well. So a little bit of that, which
Okay,
many
well,
people don't. And
thank you for making it happen.
no worries, it was my pleasure, and I made loads of notes, and I mean he speaks in he's such a vocabulary.
Articulate,
Yeah,
amazing tone.
yeah,
Yeah,
just some of the things he said. I'll send you the transcripts, and you can
I
just
feel like a bumbling idiot around that.
yeah. I mean, if you wrap that really quickly, just what he said, that interview would be amazing stuff. Yeah.
We'll figure
So,
something out with the song, but thanks again.
okay.
I guess we'll wrap it up.
All right, mate. Have a great day. Hey.
All right, mate. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
On earth we're briefly gorgeous. Connecticut gray wraps me in its carcass where the fall meets fall from grace. I'll never come up with a life hack or anything to save me from this place. Nah. I seek change, not a savior. Some days living off loose change in the sofa. Don't know the exact day that I became a grown-up. Just know it was too soon. Live quick like a throw-up. Change or die. Why? Change or die. Why? Change or... Graffiti or the bio. Since I was a child, been breathing wild style. From heaters to the dome, to cooking rocks and stone. With black and gold kings as a kid to make a few bones. Like Jack Skellington. Mother fought hard to give us everything she did. Nightmares still stick to skin like my sins. It fucked up plenty of times, but tough like Ocean Vuong. Don't ever say the homie soft. Mother is a hoarder. Mother raised the boss. Never disrespect me in my city, little cop. I promise you the ending won't be pretty, so stop now. Baby, I'm a Hartford Wells Fargo Heights 1983, swimming in my dirty blood for life, trying to get free. Boricua machetero in my soul, independent as fuck, company flow. Change or die. Why? Change or die. Why? Change or
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the song and the episode. The song will be released next week. Will be available on all streaming platforms, but you can already pre-save. Please support the artists by following them on social media and adding the song to any playlists you have. This is a completely free show, and you've listened this far, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pay us back by clicking like and subscribe. And follow at Podsongs on social media platforms, or subscribe to the newsletter at podsongs.com for special updates. Or just tell the next person you see about this amazing show where musicians interview their idols and write a song about them. The songs are available for download from the Podsongs website as well, which pays a lot more than the 0.00 whatever we get from Spotify. You can also email me at jack@podsongs.com to give feedback, suggest an artist and guest combos you'd like to hear, or just say hello. We're a listener-supported show, and I'd love to hear from you. A final thanks to my researchers, Dori Verbo and Rosa Marino, my producer, Maurizio Sanicola of Goldmine Records, and musicians Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcione. The next episode will be out soon. In the meantime, you can listen to more amazing episodes in the archives. Until then, have a great day.